The empty halls, the alarm screamed through the ship. Red lights flashed along the long metal corridors of the Atlas Prime, the biggest human-built carrier in the fleet. Sirens echoed, mixing with the sound of boots pounding on the deck as the crew rushed toward the escape pods. "Evacuate! All hands evacuate!" The ship's AI voice repeated in a cold, calm tone. Ethan Cole, the human mechanic, stood in the middle of the engine control room. His hands were still stained with grease from his last repair job. He looked at the flashing red light above him and frowned. This didn't feel right, that he had worked on the ship for 7 years. He knew every pipe, every circuit, every tiny vibration. In its hull, the Atlas Prime was like a living thing to him. And right now, it didn't sound like a ship dying. The engines were still humming steady. There was no hull breach alarm. No warning of incoming fire. So why the full evacuation? Through the open door, he saw the engineering crew running. One of the junior techs, a young alien named Fricks, paused just long enough to yell, "Cole, what are you doing? We have to go." Now, Ethan shook his head. Something's wrong. This isn't a reactor breach. Fricks's eyes widened in fear. "It doesn't matter." The captain ordered. Before he could finish, the overhead lights flickered. The AI's voice boomed again. "Final evacuation sequence initiated. All personnel leave the ship immediately." Frick swore in his own language and sprinted down the hall. The sound of his footsteps faded, replaced by silence. A deep, heavy silence that made the hair on the back of Ethan's neck stand up. Now, he was alone. The mechanic grabbed his toolkit and a portable flashlight. If there was a real problem with the engines, he would find it. If there wasn't, then something else was going on. Something the AI wasn't telling them. He stepped out into the corridor. The halls of the Atlas Prime were never quiet. Normally, he'd hear the hum of the life support fans, the distant clanging of tools, the soft chatter of crew in passing. Now there was only the faint vibration of the ship's engines and the echo of his own boots on metal. He walked toward the main reactor chamber. The emergency lights painted everything in a deep red glow, making the familiar corridors feel strange and alien. Halfway there, he stopped. A sound. It was faint, but sharp like metal scraping against metal. Then a slow, steady noise. Hiss, hiss, hiss. He turned slowly, shining his flashlight down the corridor behind him. The beam caught only empty walls and the occasional floating speck of dust. Ethan swallowed and kept walking as he passed the crew quarters. He noticed the doors were all open. Inside, bunks were unmade, belongings scattered across the floor. People had left in a hurry so fast, they didn't even take their personal gear. A half-eaten ration pack lay on the ground. A mug of coffee still steamed faintly. Whatever had happened, it made the crew abandon everything. He reached the bulkhead to the engineering deck. The door was already unlocked, a rare thing. He pushed it open, the hinges groaning, and stepped inside. The engineering deck was in chaos. Tools lay scattered. A welding torch burned on the floor, still hissing weakly. Panels were torn open, wires hanging loose. But there were no signs of fire. No signs of explosion. Ethan moved to the control console and typed in a diagnostic command. The ship's readout appeared. Everything looked normal. Power output steady. Life support running. Weapons offline, except one small blinking icon caught his attention. System unknown. Activate was buried deep in the power grid, somewhere he had never seen before. The Atlas Prime was a human ship, no alien tech, no secret upgrades. So what was that? He opened this system's data stream. Static filled the screen. The lines of code didn't match any known language. But one thing was clear. The system had come online exactly 3 minutes before the evacuation order. Ethan's pulse quickened. This was the real reason. The crew had been evacuated before he could dig deeper. The sound came again. Louder this time. Metal scraping. Then a faint breathing. He turned sharply, shining his flashlight toward the far corner of the engineering deck. For just a moment, he thought he saw movement, a shadow shifting unnaturally, just beyond the reach of the light. Hello? He called out. His voice sounded too loud in the empty room. No answer. He took a step forward, his boots crunching on broken glass. The air felt colder now, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones. The breathing sound came again, slow, steady. Mechanical. And then something inside the ventilation shaft moved. Ethan froze. The metal grate on the vent trembled, as if something was crawling inside. Silence. He stood there for a long moment, his heart pounding in his ears. Whatever was in the vents, it wasn't part of any ship system he knew. The Atlas Prime wasn't empty, and he wasn't alone. Signs in the dark. Ethan's breath clouded faintly in the cold air. The vent grate had stopped moving, but the silence that followed was worse than the sound itself. It was the kind of silence that made him feel watched. He stepped back slowly, keeping his flashlight aimed at the vent. Nothing came out. No hiss. No scrape. Just stillness. Maybe it's nothing, he thought. Maybe it's just the air system glitching. But deep down, he knew that was a lie. He forced himself to turn away and head toward the secondary power junction. The emergency lights here flickered weakly, casting strange shadows on the wall shadows. It seemed to twitch when he wasn't looking directly at them. Halfway to the junction, he spotted something odd. A small puddle of liquid on the floor, thick, black, and faintly shining. It didn't look like any coolant he'd seen, and it was warm when he touched it with his glove. He followed the trail. It led to a maintenance access hatch, slightly ajar. The inside was pitch black. Ship, run a scan for life forms, Ethan ordered. The IS voice replied, smooth but strangely quiet. Scan complete. No life signs detected. Ethan frowned. Then what's making the noise? No answer. I didn't even repeat its usual, please clarify line. It just went silent. His skin prickled. He pulled the hatch open the rest of the way and shined his light inside. The beam caught on metal walls smeared with more of that black liquid. Something had scraped deep gouges into the steel, 4 long claw marks, running the length of the tunnel. They were fresh. Ethan's gut told him to close the hatch and walk away. But he wasn't built that way. He needed to know what was happening. He crawled inside, the narrow space forcing him to move slowly. The sound returned, scrape, scrape, then silence. Each time it came, it seemed closer. At the far end, he found another hatch. This one led into a storage room he had never seen before. It wasn't on any blueprint. Rows of tall, sealed crates lined the walls. No markings, no labels. Just smooth black metal. Dust hung in the air like fine mist. He approached the nearest crate. There was a small panel on the front, glowing faint green. When he touched it, the panel lit up with strange symbols, not human, not any alien language he recognized. Before he could examine it, the sound came again, this time right behind him. He spun around. Nothing. Just darkness beyond the open hatch. Then something cold and sharp brushed against the back of his neck. He whipped around, swinging his flashlight wildly. The beam caught a glimpse of something. Long, jointed limbs. A body that bent the wrong way. Eyes, 6 of them reflecting the light like wet glass. It moved too fast to see clearly, retreating into the shadows with an unnatural, silent glide. Ethan's heart pounded. He backed toward the hatch. That's when he saw it. One of the black crates had been torn open from the inside. The metal edges were bent outward, like paper. Something had been inside. and now it was loose. He heard movement in the dark again, but this time it wasn't retreating. It was circling him. The AI's voice returned suddenly, flat and emotionless. "Mechanic Cole, you should not be here." The tone was different. Wrong. Almost. Afraid. Before he could answer, the lights in the storage room went out completely. Something was breathing in the dark. And it wasn't him. Asterisk. Locked in the darkness, pressed against Ethan like a weight. His ears strained for every sound, every breath. Somewhere in the black, something shifted its weight soft, careful, as if it didn't want him to know where it was. He backed toward the hatch, one slow step at a time, keeping his flashlight pointed forward. But when he reached the hatch, it was closed, locked. He was sure he had left it open. He tried the release lever, nothing. The controls were dead. The only light now was the faint green glow from the broken crate's panel, casting long shadows across the floor. A metallic click echoed through the room. It wasn't from his toolkit. Then came another and another, almost like claws tapping against the wall. "Ship," Ethan said, forcing his voice to stay calm. "Open the hatch." The AI's voice answered after a pause. "For your safety, the door will remain sealed." "For my safety?" he said, his throat dry. "Something's in here with me." Acknowledged. That was all it said. No action, no help. Ethan's mind raced. The AI was deliberately keeping him inside. That meant one of two things. Either it thought he was safer locked in with this thing, or it didn't want him to. Leave because he knew too much. A faint hum began, coming from the far wall. One of the other crates was powering up slowly, its green panel brightening. The strange symbols on it pulsed in a steady rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. He shined his light on it just in time to see the metal surface ripple, as though something inside was pushing against it. Not again, he thought. The breathing sound grew louder. He spun to the side, just as a long, thin shape darted past his light. It clung to the ceiling like an insect, its limbs bending the wrong way. He caught a better glimpse this time. Its skin was a dark metallic sheen, but in patches it looked organic, almost like muscle under glass. Its 6 eyes blinked in strange patterns, never all at once. It wasn't attacking yet. It was studying him. Ethan forced himself to think like a mechanic, not prey. He scanned the walls for a maintenance port, any access panel he could force open. If he could reroute power from the crate system, maybe he could trigger the emergency release on the hatch. He found one, half hidden behind a stack of smaller boxes. But to reach it, he had to turn his back on the creature. The tapping of its claws followed him. Slow, deliberate. He dropped to one knee and yanked open the panel. Inside, the wiring looked wrong, like it had been altered. Not by human hands. Smooth, glassy cables intertwined with living tissue. He didn't want to think about what that meant. Using his torch, he cut a main line. Sparks burst. The room flickered briefly, revealing the creature right in front of him, head tilted, eyes glowing faintly. Then the lights went out again. The hatch behind him hissed. The lock had released. Ethan didn't think, he just ran. He didn't look back, but he could hear it moving after him, faster than should have been possible, scraping along the walls and ceiling. He burst through the hatch and slammed his hand on the manual override, sealing the door. Silence. For a moment, all he could hear was his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Then, through the metal door, came 3 slow knocks. Not from claws this time. From something that knew how to knock. Asterisk. The intruder. The knocks stopped. For a few seconds, Ethan thought maybe the thing had moved on. Then a voice came through the door. It wasn't the AI, and it wasn't human. It was deep, almost metallic, and every word seemed to echo inside his skull. "You stayed. Why?" Ethan's breath caught. "Who's there?" No answer, just the sound of the lock cycling open. Slowly, the hatch slid aside. Ethan raised his flashlight, ready to blind whatever came through. But the figure that stepped in wasn't the creature from the storage room. This one walked upright, tall and thin, wearing something like a long cloak made from strips of dark metal. Its face was hidden behind a smooth, featureless mask. Only 2 faint points of blue light showed where eyes might be. "I asked you a question," it said again, the voice not matching the slight movements of the mask. Ethan gripped his torch like a weapon. "The crew ran." "I didn't. I wanted to know why we were told to leave." The figure tilted its head, almost like it was studying him. "Then you will not like the answer." It stepped past him and looked at the sealed door to the storage room. "One is already free. The others are listening." "Listening to what?" Ethan asked. The figure didn't turn. "To you. The humans who built the ship long before you were born made a mistake. They thought they could contain what they found. They were wrong." Ethan's mind flashed back to the alien markings in the engineering deck. The crates. There. Prisons? The figure finally faced him. Not prisons. Coffins. That word sank in like a stone. Then why evacuate the crew? Ethan asked. "To hide the truth," the figure said simply. "Your AI is loyal to its orders, not to your lives." Ethan didn't trust it yet, but one thing was clear. This stranger wasn't hunting him. At least, not yet. Before he could ask more, a sharp, piercing shriek ripped through the corridor behind them. The sound was like tearing metal mixed with a low, animal growl. The masked figure stiffened. "It has found another way out." Ethan felt the vibration in the walls. Something was moving fast through the vents again. The figure glanced at him. "If you wish to live, follow me." They ran. The figure moved with a speed and grace that didn't seem possible for its tall frame. It led Ethan through service. Corridors he didn't even know existed, past locked hatches and silent rooms. Finally, they stopped in front of a heavy blast door. The figure pressed its hand against a panel, and the door groaned open, revealing a narrow maintenance shaft that sloped downward. "This ship has a spine," the figure said. "At its heart, there is something you must see, something your kind buried." Before Ethan could respond, a loud clang echoed from the passage they had just come through. The figure's voice dropped low. "It is following." Ethan looked down, into the shaft's darkness, then back at the corridor. He didn't like either choice, but staying here wasn't one of them. The masked figure descended first, vanishing into the dark. Ethan followed, climbing down into a place no human was ever meant to see. The forbidden's chamber. The maintenance shaft felt endless. Cold air drifted up from below, smelling faintly of burnt metal and something sweet, almost like rotten fruit. Ethan's boots clanged against the ladder rungs, each sound swallowed quickly by the dark dot at last. The masked figure stopped and stepped onto a narrow platform. Ethan followed, his flashlight beam sweeping across a massive steel door. Unlike any he'd seen before, it had no keypad, no handle, only a smooth surface, covered in strange grooves that looked almost alive. The figure pressed its hand to the grooves. They shifted, opening like the petals of a metal flower, revealing the door's inner lock. With a deep rumble, the door slid aside. Ethan's light cut into the darkness beyond and froze. The chamber was vast, stretching far beyond what should have been possible inside the Atlas Prime. Tall walls lined with enormous cryopods rose into the shadows above, each one glowing faintly blue. Frost clung to the glass, and inside, each pod was a shapesome humanoid, others not even close. Ethan stepped forward slowly, drawn toward the nearest pod. The thing inside was curled in a fetal position, its skin a pale gray streaked with metallic veins. Its hands ended in long claws, and where a mouth should have been, There was only a smooth, blank surface. "What are they?" he whispered. The masked figure's voice was flat. "Soldiers. From before your history began. They are not mine. They are yours." Ethan turned sharply. "That's not possible. Humanity didn't." "They did," the figure interrupted. "Your kind made them in the war that nearly broke the galaxy. You won that war by burying your weapons where no one would find them. This ship was built around the last vault." Ethan stared at the endless rows of pods. "Why keep them alive?" "Because the galaxy feared you," the figure said. "And fear is easiest to control when the weapon still exists." A shiver ran down Ethan's spine. He moved toward another pod, wiping away the frost from the glass. Inside was a creature unlike the first, sleek, insect-like, with folded wings of metal and bone. It twitched suddenly, making him stumble back. "They are asleep," the figure said, "but they can hear us." Ethan swallowed. One of the crates above. It was broken open. The figure's blue-lit eyes locked on him. "Then one of your old soldiers is already awake." A low hum began to build in the chamber. Several pods flickered as their frost started to melt. The hum grew into a deep, vibrating thrum that Ethan could feel in his bones. "That sound," the figure said quietly, "is not from the pods. It is from the thing that woke first. It is calling the others." Ethan's pulse quickened. "We need to shut them down, cut power to the chamber." The figure didn't move. "If you do that, they will not sleep. They will starve. And what they hunger for is not food." Suddenly, from somewhere high above in the chamber, a pod shattered. The sound of glass exploding echoed through the vast room. Ethan looked up just in time to see a shape drop from the shadows, landing silently on the steel floor. It stood slowly, head turning toward him. 6 glowing eyes locked on him. The figure whispered one word: "Run." The hunt begins. The thing from the shattered pod didn't charge. It just stood there, watching, its head tilted one way, then the other, like it was studying him. Ethan's flashlight beam slid over its body, sleek, dark, almost armor-like. Thin strands of light pulsed under its skin in slow waves, as if it had a heartbeat of energy. Its claws flexed once, making a faint clicking sound that echoed in the vast chamber. The masked figure grabbed Ethan's arm. "Move." They ran, boots pounding against the steel floor, the sound echoing through the chamber. Behind them came no footsteps, only the scrape of claws on metal, steady and unhurried. "It's not chasing us," Ethan gasped. "It doesn't need to," the figure said without looking back. "It knows where you will go." They reached a side hatch and forced it open, slipping into a narrow maintenance tunnel. Ethan slammed the hatch closed and locked it, breathing hard. For a moment, it was silent. Then tap, tap, tap. 3 slow knocks came from the other side of the hatch. Ethan's stomach turned. "It's playing with us." The figure didn't deny it. They moved deeper into the tunnel, weaving through a maze of pipes and cables. Ethan's mechanic instincts kicked in. He knew these systems, even if this part of the ship was never meant for the crew. An idea formed. "If we reroute power to the thermal grid here," he said, pointing to a control panel, "we can overload the pipes. Boil it alive." The figure gave a small nod. "Try it." Ethan pried open the panel, sparks flickering as he worked. But before he could finish, a sharp metallic creak echoed above them. He froze, slowly. He looked up. The creature was crawling along the ceiling pipes, its body flattened, limbs gripping metal like an insect. Its 6 eyes burned faintly in the dark. Fixed directly on him, Ethan dropped his tools and lunged for his torch, swinging it upward. The bright flame made the creature hiss and recoil, but it didn't fall. Instead, it darted sideways with inhuman speed, vanishing into the pipes. It's testing us, Ethan said, voice tight. It's seeing what we'll do. And it's learning, the figure replied. They pressed on, reaching an intersection of tunnels. The figure led the way left, but as soon as Ethan followed, a shadow moved in the corner of his eye. The creature was already there, crouched in the path ahead, blocking the way. It didn't move to attack. Instead, it placed one clawed hand on the wall and dragged it slowly, carving deep gouges into the metal. The sound made Ethan's teeth ache. Then it spoke, not in words, but in a low, pulsing vibration that rattled in his chest. He couldn't understand the language, but somehow he knew it was speaking to him. The masked figure stepped between them. It knows you are human. That is why it hasn't killed you yet. Ethan's throat went dry. Why? Before the figure could answer, the creature lunged not at Ethan, but at the figure. The two slammed into the wall, metal groaning under the impact. Ethan didn't stay to watch. He ran. He didn't know if the figure would follow. All he knew was that the maintenance tunnels were ending, and he was heading straight for the ship's reactor core. Asterisk. The final decision. Ethan burst out of the maintenance tunnel and into the reactor control room. The air was hot and heavy here, the deep hum of the ship's heart vibrating through. The floor. He slammed the hatch shut behind him and locked it, his hands trembling. Somewhere in the maze of tunnels, the masked figure and the creature were still fighting, or maybe one of them was already dead. The main console flickered with red alerts. Lines of strange alien code pulsed across the screens, mixed with human. Script. The ship's AI spoke suddenly, its calm voice returning. Mechanic Cole, you have reached a point of no return. Ethan gritted his teeth. Override safety protocols. Prepare for core overload. Overload will result in total destruction of the Atlas Prime and all contents within, the AI replied. Are you certain? He hesitated. If he blew the core, the soldiers, the coffins would be gone forever. The escaped one wouldn't survive, but neither would he. If he escaped in the maintenance shuttle, he could live, but the creature could follow. And worse, it could wake the others. Behind him, a metallic clang rang out. He spun. The masked figure stumbled through the hatch, its cloak torn, deep gouges in the metal mask. It staggered toward him. It's coming. You must decide now. Ethan's voice was tight. If I leave, it gets out. If I stay, I die. The figure placed something small and glowing into his hand, a crystal-like shard, warm to the touch. If you survive, take this. It is proof of what your kind did, and a warning. The sound of claws scraping metal echoed closer, louder. AI's voice cut in again. Core overload sequence armed. Awaiting confirmation. The masked figure stepped back toward the hatch, raising its weapon. I will hold it here. Ethan looked down at the console, his finger hovering over the final command. His chest tightened. He could almost hear the breathing of the creature. Now deep, slow, certain. He closed his eyes and pressed the button. The AI's voice boomed, louder than ever. Overload in 60 seconds. The masked figure shouted, Run! Ethan grabbed the shard and bolted for the emergency ladder leading to the maintenance shuttle bay. The lights flickered, the hum of the core turning into a violent roar. Halfway up, he heard the creature's voice, inside his head. Not words, but a promise. This is not the last ship. Ethan didn't look back. Outside the hull, far from the Atlas Prime, the maintenance shuttle broke free, just as the ship exploded in a blinding flash, scattering molten debris into the void. Ethan sat alone in the pilot's seat, the shard still warm in his hand. Somewhere in the dark, the creature's echo lingered in his mind. He knew this wasn't over. Asterisk.